Hi there. So for my article review thing, I did the effectiveness of cryotherapy on pain intensity, swelling, range of motion function, and reoccurrence of acute ankle sprain, a systematic review of randomized trials. It's done by a lot of people. Let me get my notes up. And so for the intro, one of the things that they said is that per 1,000 explosions, it leads to about 7 ankle sprains, and that this is, of course, across a wide variety of athletes, but it is most common in like youth female athletes. And then after a new episode, high frequency, it causes a higher frequency of chronic ankle instability and reoccurrence, and then it has direct and indirect expenses for cryotherapy. Cryotherapy has been recommended by clinical practices and used by healthcare professionals for a really long time. It is good because it helps with low cost, easy application, and is considered effective. And so then for this study, it was both sexes regardless of age and for like a stage of 7 days. Cryotherapy is defined as many things. A lot of them they had like multiple different acronyms. That there's of course RICE, which is rest, ice, compression, elevation, and then they had PRICE, which was protection. It was protection, rest, ice, elevation, and then they had another one that I cannot remember off the top of my head. So of course, like I said, this is like a systematic review, so this is actually covering multiple, and so they broke it down. They had like 2 specifically for pain, so those are the ones that I focused on. And so they had 243 titles, and then they erased duplicates, and so then they were down to like 147, and then after that they went through and like completely reviewed 19, so 19 full texts were screened. The purpose was to find the effectiveness of cryotherapy on pain intensity, swelling, range of motion, function, and reoccurrence. So for this one, I really focused on pain intensity and like swelling. And so the article by Salone, which is one of the 2 that I'm going to be really covering, is that it showed no difference in pain intensity, but also they didn't report outcomes or data of how it was measured. So they really didn't give any information. They just were kind of like, it didn't work. And so then Laba and Rostenberg showed that they used a 5-point Likert scale that ranged from no pain, 0, to very severe pain, which was a 5. The mean for the post-innervation scores were 0.21 with a standard deviation of 0.41. And then on the 5-point scale, and then afterwards, it was 0.25 with a standard deviation of 0.44 for the other intervention standalone. So what those numbers basically mean is that there was no significant difference on pain intensity at a short term. So then how would this affect clinical application? This would cause clinicians to rethink their like applications and everything, because we, as healthcare professionals, especially in like acute injuries such as like ankle sprains, we use cryotherapy a lot. And so then authors concluded that there was not enough evidence to support the effectiveness of the cryotherapy. And then issues I found that I feel like were not helpful was the lack of data and not enough participants. Like, they didn't say how many participants, but if they were saying that there's not enough, there was not a concise enough trial that they conducted. And so they also said in the article that it was not isolated to cryotherapy, that they didn't focus specifically on cryotherapy. So then for what I would change, I would focus specifically on cryotherapy and have like set groups, and make sure that the groups or the articles that I'm like reviewing for the systematic review were at least within the same range as the other ones that they were being compared and compressed into.